may have heard the story about Q&A this weekend where they were talking to people who work in WINZ who had been told that they would be punished for helping too many people into emergency housing, for going over the limits that the government had set. Well, you might not have as well, because the media went a little crazy when Nicole McKee was named as the 2IC for ACT. Nicole McKee, who was an MP that actually lied about what the Christchurch terrorist was carrying to try and push her pro-gun agenda, and the police told her to stop misleading the public because it was really deceptive and it kind of humanised the Christchurch terrorist. She's their new 2IC, a party that's just barely over 6% at the moment in the polls. And the media went nuts about that instead of, important things like how cruel the government is. Anyway, speaking of, that should not have been a surprise to us, hearing that the government was being needlessly cruel. This was the government, after all, that cancelled the flexible disability support funding with no notice, or that put on incredibly hard benefit sanctions for job seekers, who overhauled the healthy school lunch program and replaced locally made, locally sourced food and employment with centralised slop. This was the government that got rid of fair pay agreements and pay equity. $12 billion to stop women in specific roles from being paid the same as men in comparable businesses and roles. There was the re-indexing of welfare to CPI and not wages. You might have noticed, actually, that the government has been really pushing the message that wages are going to rise really fast over the next couple of years. Yeah. Not if you're on a benefit. Or cancelling state house building projects, or not funding promised cancer meds and then having to, because they, had all that public outcry, so they took the money from the budget the year later. There was the banning of puberty blocker access after refusing to release a report on the importance of the use for young trans people. There was forcing teenagers to be means tested before being allowed a benefit at 18. There was the anti-trans definition bill, or definition of gender bill, that's still going through, and you've got until the 2nd of July to get your submissions in. There was removing RSE guidelines in schools, which stop young people from learning skills to keep them safe and aware of ways that they can be abused or taken advantage of. There was removing of Section 7AA of the Oranga Tamariki Act, repeating that systemic setup that led to historic harms for rangatahi Māori in particular. There was a boot camp for kids, where they actually allowed a law change to allow physical punishments. After Karen Chower got onto a meeting with Tova and said, "We would never do anything like that," and suggesting it was cruel. There was increasing rent in social housing, people who have really limited incomes being told that they have to pay more. There was cutting Māori-specific funding for health infrastructure, including removing funding for cancer screenings to raise the age for Māori accessibility, knowing it would lead to more deaths in Māori and Pacifica men. There was the move-on orders, punishing homeless people for being homeless. And there was removing workplace safety laws that's going through at the moment that the government admits will lead to more deaths. But hey, they're going to allow it anyway because of the coalition agreement. When it comes to cruelty, this government has set a precedent for just how cruel it can be. And we often forget because it's been 3 years, it gets talked down, the media puts in the focus on the government perspective and uses the government lines, which takes back that power that people have when they go, well, this is cruel. All right, and that's something that we need to remember going into this election, that we're the ones with the power and we're the ones who can see how cruel some of these government decisions are. And I'm sure that there are going to be a lot more out there as well that people can list off in the comment section. So please be really aware of exactly what it is you're voting for this year, knowing that something as shocking as what we saw on the weekend, not the Nicole McKee thing, the whole let's keep people homeless thing while we punish people for being homeless, that's not unusual. That's how this government operates.